Welcome to Macrobytes with Greg Daco, EY-Parthenon Chief Economist. In this episode, Greg is joined by Praveen Arivazhagan, EY-Parthenon Chief Venture Builder.
Welcome to Macrobytes. I'm Greg Daco, Chief Economist at EY-Parthenon. And today, I'm joined by our very own Praveen Arivazhagan, Chief Venture Builder. Today, we're going to be discussing some unique corporate growth strategies with Praveen. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
It's a pleasure. We have a lot to discuss today, in particular in an economic environment that is quite complex. Recently, we've seen the development of new policies that are likely to disrupt economic activity, and we have a U.S. economy that is highly desynchronized in terms of the speed of growth of different sectors. The industrial sector is lagging the overall economy. The consumer sector is actually leading the way. And then across the board, you have a series of services sectors that are each evolving at their own pace. How should companies navigate this highly complex environment?
When you think about growth levers, of course, inorganic transactions can definitely lend themselves. They're necessary, but not sufficient condition. And then when you look at the other growth lever we've all known for a long time is the organic transformations. Now, the challenge here is that inorganic transactions is a balance sheet funded, let's go buy growth. Yeah. Organic transformation gets curtailed because a lot of that has to be funded out of the P&L. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what is a third lever that could potentially unleash organic growth.
So you have a little secret recipe there, I sense. You do have the organic growth avenues that are in part driven by the macro environment, right? But we have a U.S. economy that has been exceptional over the past 2 years, growing over 3% with an unemployment rate at 4%, all that you could wish for. But we are starting to see a little bit of a slower pace of growth in terms of economic activity, in terms of consumer spending, and we still have interest rates that are relatively elevated. So organic growth is one avenue. It's always going to be. Inorganic growth is also another avenue. And there, our deal barometer predicts about 10-11% growth for the year. But what is that secret recipe for growth that you have for corporates?
When you look at every value chain, all the industries you talked about, industrials, consumer, life sciences, what have you, and you look at the insurgents in this the successful ones and their growth rates and the incumbents, the insurgents are growing at 3 to 5x. So which tells you is that the value chain and the customer base of the value chain can actually accept that kind of growth rate. What that really needs is a different business model that needs to be introduced. Now, how do you do that better than the insurgents? I believe it's a secret in plain sight. Because incumbents have strategic endowments, which are like their existing customer base, their distribution partners, their supply chain, the IP, tech, data, all the transactions that they have visibility into, which insurgents don't have. Why wouldn't incumbents actually sweat these assets, the endowments, to actually access new revenue pools across the value chain to turbocharge growth? That's really what we're talking about.
Can you give us some specific examples of how we're helping clients drive growth via the corporate venture building strategy?
Let's quickly look at industrials. Now, industrials, as you laid it out, they are probably the most lagging in terms of driving the growth, especially in this environment. But however, they have an unbelievable install base. Now, let's look at an example. We are helping a corporate client who who's an equipment manufacturer. That equipment itself is only less than 10% of the total cost of operation that the customer buys this equipment for. That entire downstream value chain is actually accessible to you because you own the customer. If you look at the amount of insurgents and VC-funded startups operating and creating value out of that, that's where we are taking our corporate client to access and create new solutions in the downstream, whether it is telematics-based or it is fuel-based or tire-based, as examples.
It's a great example because when you think of it from a macro perspective, it's really minimizing or taking advantage of the fixed cost that essentially you don't have to buy. You don't have to make that additional purchase because you already own that fixed cost, and then you're just focusing.
And you don't need to acquire that customer again. You already have the customer.
So even the variable cost is compressed.
Exactly.
Can you give us perhaps an example of how you're working with that in the consumer space?
Yeah, look, the consumer space, I think there is just so much latent potential because consumer companies probably have the most amount of data of anybody in the market because they actually are B2B2C. Now, we are working with one of the consumer products companies where we are making them indispensable to their channel, right? Now, what that means is that the channels are fragmented and then they're also looking for new ways of growth to be relevant. Now, if you're able to look again, in this case, like the other case, look across the value chain and create new avenues of growth, but also in this process, not disintermediate, but co-opt the channel and co-opt the customer, that's what we're doing. And this becomes, let's say, a consumer product company trying to drive a retail services company, for instance.
And there you have a big advantage of having the brand, which is really a key difficulty to acquire over time. It requires building the trust. It requires building the service that is valued by clients. So that's really important. So what about in the healthcare and life sciences space? I know there's a looming patent cliff, for instance, that could create some difficulties, some headwinds. We're also seeing some talent shortages in the healthcare space. How are we helping clients there?
This is where, leveraging tech, data, AI, and digital and introducing new business models in a way where you're building more intimacy with the end patient, consumer becomes paramount. The only big challenge here is it's not that the healthcare and life sciences companies have not done this. The innovation theater has been around and people have tried to create new user journeys. But what they missed the point on, like, how do I actually monetize? How do I deliver value to you, the patient? How do I bring the payer along to make sure they get a win-win? Ultimately, for life science healthcare clients, what we're working on right now, where we're working on a chronic healthcare management platform, is how do you get the providers, payers, the patient, and the pharmaco all create a win-win proposition in the pursuit of, a cost-efficient chronic healthcare management platform.
Now, the way you described it across industrials, across consumer sector, across the healthcare and life sciences sector sounds relatively easy. Why do you think corporates are not going all in this growth avenue?
It's about building baby whales and not goldfish. Talk about starting small, experimenting your way through this, which is very important to build conviction. But in the journey of experimenting, if you end up building goldfishes, you put it in the ocean, it will never become a blue whale of a business.
Yeah.
The key is to know how to do that, brass tacks right, but also keeping that vision and ability to scale this up is what's going to be critical in this journey.
Imagine I were a CEO and you were advising me on how to do that, how to build a corporate venture building strategy that would drive growth, not just tomorrow, but over the next few years. What would you advise me to do?
Creating the agenda, looking at your endowments, getting visibility into what you truly own, and how do you create business models that can sweat these assets and create these experiments. But the key here is that behind every corporate's endowment, there is $1 billion of enterprise value hidden, waiting to be unleashed. And venture building is a way we can make that happen.
$1 billion, that's a huge amount to unlock in terms of corporate growth strategy. So thank you very much, Praveen. Your insights were amazing.
Thank you for having me, Greg.
Tune in next time for another episode of Macro Bites.